Andrea Hart's hands froze over the velvet ribbon she had been tying. The elegant packaging she was preparing for a loyal customer momentarily blurred as her phone buzzed on the counter beside her. She rarely allowed herself to be distracted at work, especially during peak hours, but something about this notification felt off. Curiosity won. She glanced at the screen and saw the text. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the message. I'm leaving you. Moving to Miami with my girlfriend, Karina. I've emptied our joint account. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. The message lingered on the screen like an ugly scar against her otherwise pristine life. For a moment, she felt the world shift beneath her feet. Customers chatted around her, oblivious to the bombshell that had just been dropped. Andrea inhaled sharply, forcing her composure to return. With deliberate care, she finished the bow, then handed the wrapped package to Mrs. Dumont, one of her most loyal patrons. Thank you for your purchase, Andrea said, her voice calm and professional, betraying none of the storm brewing within her. Mrs. Dumont, an older woman with a taste for classic elegance, smiled warmly. Andrea, your boutique never disappoints. I'll be back next week for that new scarf collection you mentioned. Andrea nodded, her expression soft but distant. Of course. See you next week, Mrs. Dumont. As the bell over the door chimed with Mrs. Dumont's exit, Andrea turned the lock and flipped the sign to closed. Her boutique, nestled in the heart of New Orleans' French Quarter, was a haven of sophistication and creativity, but today it felt suffocating. The text burned in her mind. John Carter, her husband of 8 years, had shattered their marriage in one short, cruel message. And Karina, the name lingered bitterly. Andrea remembered her, the young, overly ambitious assistant from John's office who barely understood professionalism. Andrea picked up her phone again, reading the text a second time. She noticed the smug tone, the arrogance practically dripping from the words. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of an emotional reaction, not now, not ever. Her reply was short and deliberate. Good luck. The words felt sharp yet hollow as she sent the text. She knew John would expect her to crumble, to call him back with anger or tears. But Andrea had always been more than he gave her credit for. She glanced around the boutique, her sanctuary, and took a moment to gather herself. The soft lighting highlighted rows of carefully curated dresses and accessories, each piece representing her years of hard work. It wasn't just a shop. It was a symbol of her independence, something John had never truly understood. Andrea pulled out a notebook from beneath the counter, the one where she documented everything, the signs of John's betrayals she had quietly observed over the past year, the receipts, the messages. This notebook wasn't just a record, it was her shield. Her phone buzzed again, another message from John. Don't bother begging. Karina and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Andrea smirked bitterly. If only he knew how little she intended to beg. With calm precision, she picked up her phone and dialed Maria Lopez, her lawyer. It's time, Andrea said simply, her voice steady. Maria's response came immediately. I'll file the papers tomorrow. Do you want him served in Miami? Let him think he's won for now, Andrea replied. I'll call you if anything changes. She ended the call and set her phone down, her mind already calculating her next steps. John believed he had outsmarted her, but he couldn't have been more wrong. Andrea poured herself a glass of water, her movements deliberate and calm, though her thoughts were anything but. She replayed John's smug words in her mind, each syllable another reminder of how he had underestimated her. The nerve to send such a message and assume she would crumble like a discarded piece of paper. She took a slow sip, staring out the boutique's large front window at the bustling French Quarter. The vibrant sounds of street musicians and the rhythmic hum of passing conversations filled the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. Yet even amidst the chaos, Andrea felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. She placed the glass down and returned to the counter, opening her laptop. Her fingers moved swiftly as she logged into the joint account John had mentioned. Unsurprisingly, the balance read a disheartening 0. Andrea had anticipated this. Months ago, when she had first begun noticing John's uncharacteristic behavior, she'd taken steps to protect herself. Her personal account at a different bank was untouched. It held the boutique's profits and her personal savings, funds John had no idea existed. She had ensured their joint account always looked active enough to avoid suspicion, carefully leaving just enough to appear legitimate while securing the rest of her finances. Andrea closed the banking app and opened her private financial tracker, double-checking her records. Every questionable transaction John had made in the past year was neatly documented. Hotel stays, expensive dinners, and unexplained withdrawals, all meticulously noted. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from John. "I know this must be hard for you. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. Maybe you'll even find someone your own age." Andrea's lips curled into a faint smile. He had always belittled the boutique, calling it her hobby. But this little shop had grown into a thriving business, generating more revenue than John's corporate job ever had. She picked up her phone, snapping screenshots of his messages and adding them to her growing file of evidence. Andrea knew every arrogant word he sent would only strengthen her case. Let him gloat, she thought. He was digging his own grave, and he didn't even realize it. The clock on the wall chimed softly, marking the passing hour. Andrea glanced at the time, realizing it was well past closing. She looked around the boutique, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. The boutique wasn't just her livelihood, it was her sanctuary, her proof that she could build something extraordinary from the ground up. Before heading upstairs to the small office she kept at the boutique, Andrea pulled out the framed deed to her grandmother's house. She had insisted on keeping the property solely in her name, despite John's repeated suggestions to add him to the title. That decision now felt like one of the smartest moves she'd ever made. Settling into her office chair, Andrea began organizing the documents Maria would need for the divorce proceedings. Her focus sharpened with each file she prepared. This wasn't just about protecting her assets, it was about reclaiming her narrative. Her phone buzzed one final time for the night. "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller." Andrea couldn't help but laugh. Did he truly think he had any claim to her home? The sheer arrogance of it was almost impressive. She added the text to her evidence folder, knowing Maria would enjoy using it in court. Tomorrow, Andrea thought, John would wake up still basking in the delusion that he'd won. But the reality he would soon face would be far from the fantasy he'd built in his mind. Standing, Andrea turned off the boutique's lights and locked the doors behind her. The cool evening breeze greeted her as she stepped outside. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small moment of vulnerability, exhaling deeply as the weight of the situation settled. But it was only a moment. Andrea straightened her shoulders, her resolve firm. She wasn't going to let John or anyone else define her story. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Andrea sat at her dining table, the soft hum of the ceiling fan above her breaking the silence of the evening. Before her lay an open notebook filled with neat, precise handwriting, her own record of John's betrayals. This was no ordinary diary, but a carefully curated log of inconsistencies and half-truths that she had begun compiling months ago. At first, it had been instinctive, a quiet way to process the changes she had noticed in her husband. Now it was her armor. The first entry was from a night nearly a year ago. John had come home late, the faint scent of perfume lingering on his collar. When Andrea had asked, he'd mumbled something about a team dinner and hurried to the shower. She hadn't pressed further, but it was the first moment she'd felt the nagging pull of doubt. That same night, she'd jotted the incident down in this very notebook. As the months passed, the signs multiplied. The late nights became more frequent, his phone grew permanently password protected, and his spending habits turned erratic. Andrea had initially chalked it up to midlife restlessness, a phase he might grow out of. But the receipt for a dinner for two at a high-end restaurant, dated on a night he claimed to be working late, had been the turning point. That was when she knew. She turned the page to more recent entries, her pen marks firmer, more deliberate. Every hotel charge on their joint credit card, every unexplained withdrawal, and every suspicious excuse was documented with the precision of a detective building a case. Andrea hadn't realized it at the time, but she had been preparing for this exact moment, when John's betrayal would finally surface, leaving her with the proof she needed to protect herself. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Maria, her lawyer. "I'll file the papers first thing tomorrow morning. We're ready." Andrea smiled faintly, replying with a simple, "Thank you." She had chosen Maria for her reputation as one of the best divorce attorneys in New Orleans, a woman known for her strategic mind and tenacity in court. Maria had been quick to understand Andrea's situation, offering calm, pragmatic advice during their initial meeting 2 months ago. "Keep a record of everything," Maria had said. "If it feels wrong, write it down. If it looks suspicious, save it. Evidence is your best defense." And so Andrea had. The notebook before her was proof of her diligence and foresight. With a deep breath, she closed it, placing it neatly atop the stack of legal documents she had already prepared for Maria. As Andrea stood to tidy up the table, a wave of clarity washed over her. For months, she had felt the slow erosion of her marriage, the creeping sense that she was losing control of her own life. But now, with every step she took to reclaim her independence, she felt stronger. This wasn't the collapse of her world. It was the foundation for something new. Andrea moved to the kitchen, the quiet hum of determination settling over her. She poured herself a cup of tea, letting the warmth anchor her as her thoughts organized themselves into a plan. The reality of what she was about to face didn't intimidate her. It energized her. For the first time in months, she felt like she was steering her own course. As she sipped her tea, her thoughts turned to John. She had once believed in their partnership, a shared dream that had seemed so solid when they first married. Back then, they had promised each other a life built on respect and mutual support. But over the years, cracks had formed, subtle at first, but growing deeper with each selfish decision he made. Now those cracks had shattered their foundation entirely, leaving Andrea to pick up the pieces. But she wasn't just picking up pieces. She was rebuilding, stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. She thought about her boutique, her sanctuary. It had been her passion project from the start, something she had built from scratch with long hours, careful planning, and an eye for detail. John had often dismissed it, calling it a hobby or a distraction, but Andrea had known better. That boutique was her proof that she could create something beautiful and successful on her own terms. She set her cup down and pulled out her laptop. Logging into her private account, she reviewed her financial records again, double-checking that every penny was accounted for. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Each entry in her financial tracker reassured her that she had protected what mattered most. John may have emptied their joint account, but he hadn't touched what truly belonged to her. Her thoughts drifted to Karina, the young woman John had chosen over her. Andrea didn't know much about her, apart from their brief encounter at a corporate holiday party last year. Karina had seemed vibrant and ambitious, the type to eagerly laugh at John's jokes and hang on his every word. Andrea wondered if Karina understood what she was walking into. It wasn't her fault necessarily. John's betrayal was his alone to bear. But Andrea couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the girl who likely believed in promises that would never materialize. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her thoughts. This time, it was Margot. "Everything okay, boss? You seemed distracted today. Let me know if you need anything." Andrea smiled at the message. Margot had been her right hand at the boutique for years, a loyal and perceptive assistant who could sense when something was amiss. Andrea hesitated for a moment before replying, "Thanks, Margot. I'll be fine. Just a busy day. See you tomorrow." She didn't want to burden Margot with her personal life, at least not yet. There would be time to share when the dust settled. For now, she needed to focus on staying one step ahead. The clock struck midnight as Andrea finally shut her laptop and tidied her workspace. Tomorrow would bring the first legal steps in ending her marriage, a process she knew would be emotionally taxing but ultimately freeing. She felt a sense of closure as she placed the stack of documents into her bag, ready to deliver to Maria first thing in the morning. As she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, Andrea paused at the framed wedding photo hanging in the hallway. She studied it for a moment, her younger self smiling brightly, holding John's hand. It was a memory of a time when she believed in their future, but now it felt like a relic of someone else's life. Without hesitation, she reached up and removed the frame from the wall. Walking to the hall closet, she placed it inside and closed the door. The past would stay there, safely tucked away, while she moved forward. Andrea climbed into bed, her mind already turning to the days ahead. She wasn't just preparing for a fight, she was preparing for freedom. Andrea arrived at Maria's office early the next morning, her bag neatly packed with the documents she had spent hours preparing. The reception area smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, a sharp contrast to the tension simmering just beneath Andrea's composed demeanor. She didn't have to wait long before Maria emerged, her sharp navy blazer and confident stride radiating professionalism. "Good morning, Andrea," Maria greeted, gesturing toward her office. "Let's get started." As they settled into the chairs across from each other, Andrea handed over the stack of papers. Maria began flipping through the neatly organized evidence, her brow furrowing slightly as she scanned receipts, messages, and account statements. "This is excellent," Maria said after a moment, setting the documents aside. "You've done an impressive job documenting everything. It's clear we have a strong case." Andrea nodded. She had expected as much, but hearing it confirmed by Maria felt like another piece of armor being secured. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Maria leaned back, steepling her fingers. "First, I'll file the divorce papers today, along with a motion to freeze the remaining joint assets. That will prevent John from attempting any further financial manipulation. Next, we'll serve him the papers. Have you decided whether you want to do it here or wait until he's in Miami?" Andrea hesitated, considering her options. Letting John think he had escaped unscathed for a little longer held a certain appeal. "Let's wait until he's in Miami," she said. "I want him to think he's won, for now." Maria's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "Smart move. It will give us time to ensure everything is in place before he's even aware of what's coming." Andrea felt a flicker of satisfaction at Maria's approval. She had chosen the lawyer not just for her expertise, but for her ability to strategize, to anticipate every move the opposing side might make. As they continued discussing the next steps, Maria outlined how they would approach the financial fraud John had committed. The joint account transactions, the hotel bookings, and even the airline tickets Karina had so gleefully posted about on social media would all form part of their case. "Keep an eye on her posts," Maria advised. "The more evidence we have, the better. People often reveal far more than they realize online." Andrea made a mental note to do just that. Karina's social media presence had already proven useful, and Andrea suspected it would continue to be a valuable source of information. The meeting wrapped up with a final review of their strategy. As Andrea stepped out of Maria's office, the weight she had carried for months began to feel lighter. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was taking control. Outside, the streets of New Orleans were alive with their usual rhythm, the scent of beignets wafting from a nearby cafe, mingling with the sounds of a street performer's trumpet. Andrea paused, inhaling deeply. The city's vibrancy mirrored her own growing sense of determination. She wasn't just preparing for a legal battle, she was preparing to rebuild her life. Andrea walked toward her boutique with renewed focus, the morning sunlight warming the cobblestone streets beneath her feet. As she approached the shop, her phone buzzed with a notification. Curious, she glanced down and saw a message from Margot. "Shipment just arrived. Unpacking now. Do you want me to hold off on the display until you're here?" Andrea smiled at Margot's reliability. She quickly typed back, "Go ahead, I'll be there shortly." The boutique's operations were in good hands, and that knowledge allowed Andrea to shift her focus entirely to the task at hand. When she arrived, the sight of Margot arranging an array of new handbags brought a sense of normalcy to the chaos swirling in her personal life. Margot greeted her with a cheerful smile. "Morning! You're looking sharp today." Andrea chuckled softly. "Thanks. I just came from Maria's office. We're moving forward." Margot paused, her expression turning serious. "That's great news. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, you just let me know." "Honestly, just keeping this place running as smoothly as you already are is more than enough," Andrea said warmly. She stepped into her office, ready to check the latest financial updates. The boutique was a sanctuary, but Andrea was keenly aware that John and Karina's Miami plans were unraveling even as she worked. She logged into her private account to double-check her finances. Everything was intact, as expected. Her thoughts briefly turned to John. He likely hadn't yet realized the extent of her preparation, but the realization would come soon enough. For now, she focused on ensuring every detail of her own life remained secure and intact. Margot knocked on the doorframe holding a steaming cup of coffee. "Fuel for the boss," she said with a grin. Andrea took it gratefully, leaning back in her chair. "You know, Margot," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about expanding. Maybe it's time to start looking at a second location." Margot's face lit up. "Really? That's amazing. You've been talking about it for a while. I think you're more than ready." Andrea nodded slowly, her gaze steady. "It's not just about growing the business. It's about proving that nothing and no one can hold me back." Andrea was arranging a new window display at the boutique when her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen and saw Linda Carter's name flash across it. Her hand hesitated for a moment before she picked up the call. Linda, John's mother, rarely contacted her directly, and Andrea couldn't imagine this was going to be a friendly chat. "Hello, Linda," Andrea said, her tone polite but cautious. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a breathy exhale. "Andrea," Linda began, her voice strained, "I've just spoken to John. He told me everything." Andrea closed her eyes briefly, gathering her thoughts. She hadn't expected John to inform his mother so soon, but she supposed his ego wouldn't allow him to keep quiet. "And what exactly did he tell you?" she asked, her tone neutral. "He said you've frozen the accounts and that you're making things unnecessarily difficult," Linda replied, her frustration evident. "He told me you've been controlling, cold and distant for years. I'm trying to understand, Andrea. What happened between you two?" Andrea took a steadying breath, her hand gripping the edge of the counter. Linda, she began evenly, I'm not sure what John has told you, but let me make this clear. I've done nothing but support him for years. The financial issues, the frozen accounts. That was a legal response to him emptying our joint account to fund his trip to Miami with another woman. There was silence on the line, the weight of Andrea's words settling in. Linda's voice, when it came again, was softer, tinged with disbelief. John didn't tell me about that. I didn't think he would, Andrea said, her voice steady but firm. But I have evidence. Receipts, bank statements, and his own texts admitting it. I'm doing what I have to do to protect myself. Another pause. Then Linda sighed deeply. I don't know what to say. This isn't the John I raised. Andrea's grip on the counter eased slightly. She could sense the shift in Linda's tone, the crack in her unwavering defense of her son. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this, Linda, Andrea said sincerely. But I can't let him continue to take advantage of me. I won't. I understand, Linda murmured, though her voice carried the weight of disappointment. I need time to process this, Andrea. Thank you for being honest. Andrea ended the call and placed the phone back on the counter, her thoughts swirling. She had no desire to alienate Linda, but she wouldn't allow herself to be vilified either. The truth was on her side, and that was all she needed. As she returned to the window display, Margot appeared, holding a clipboard. Everything okay? She asked, her eyes narrowing in concern. Andrea nodded. Just another piece of fallout from this mess. But I think Linda is starting to see the truth. Margot gave a small, encouraging smile. She'll come around. People like John can only hide their lies for so long. Andrea appreciated the reassurance, but knew that this was only the beginning. John's family might be questioning his actions now, but convincing them completely would take time, and perhaps more evidence. Later that afternoon, Andrea's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Amanda Carter, John's sister. Unlike Linda, Amanda had always been more practical and less inclined to blindly defend her brother. Andrea hesitated for a moment before opening the message. Can we talk? I need to know what's really going on. Andrea typed back quickly. Of course. Are you free to stop by the boutique? Amanda arrived not long after, her face a mixture of curiosity and frustration. Dressed in business attire, she exuded the air of someone who didn't tolerate nonsense, which was something Andrea had always respected about her. Thanks for meeting me, Amanda said as she entered the boutique. She glanced around at the beautifully arranged displays before meeting Andrea's eyes. I just got off the phone with Mum. She mentioned your conversation earlier, and I'm trying to make sense of everything. Andrea gestured toward a small seating area at the back of the boutique. Let's talk, she said simply. As they settled into the plush chairs, Andrea handed Amanda a folder she had prepared earlier, knowing this moment might come. Inside were copies of the most damning pieces of evidence. Screenshots of John's texts, bank statements showing the emptied account, and even a few receipts for lavish dinners and hotel stays. Amanda flipped through the folder, her expression growing darker with each page. So this is all real, she muttered, shaking her head. I knew John was reckless, but I didn't think he'd go this far. Andrea leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. Amanda, I didn't want this. I never imagined our marriage would end like this. But John made his choices, and now I have to protect myself. I hope you understand that. Amanda closed the folder and met Andrea's gaze. I do. Honestly, I've been fed up with him for years, but Mom always makes excuses for him. She doesn't want to see the truth. Andrea nodded, understanding the familial loyalty that could blind people to reality. I'm not trying to turn anyone against him, she said, but I won't stand by and let him manipulate the narrative either. Amanda gave a small, rueful smile. Don't worry about that. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's liars. And it looks like John's been lying to everyone, not just you. They spent the next half hour discussing the fallout of John's actions. Amanda agreed to keep Linda informed, though she admitted it would be a slow process to fully convince her mother of the truth. Before she left, Amanda placed a hand on Andrea's shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this with more grace than most people could. If you need anything, let me know. Andrea watched Amanda leave, feeling a glimmer of hope. With Amanda on her side, she felt slightly less alone in this battle. As the boutique quieted again, Andrea reflected on the day's events. She had begun to see the ripple effect of John's choices, not just in her life, but in the lives of those around him. The truth was starting to surface, and Andrea knew it was only a matter of time before John's carefully constructed facade came crashing down. But for now, she had work to do. The boutique wouldn't run itself, and Andrea was determined to keep moving forward, no matter what came next. The buzz of activity filled Andrea's boutique as the weekend approached, customers browsing through racks of dresses and accessories while soft jazz played in the background. It was a scene of organized chaos, exactly how Andrea liked it. Margot was at the front counter, efficiently ringing up purchases and chatting with clients, her energy a steadying force amidst the bustle. Andrea stood near the back, reviewing the details for an upcoming promotional event. It was the boutique's biggest event of the season, designed to showcase a new collection of designer handbags and custom jewelry. Vendors had already confirmed, invitations had been sent, and every detail had been meticulously planned. Despite her confidence in the event, a subtle unease nagged at Andrea. She couldn't shake the feeling that her personal life was seeping into her professional space. The whispers had started a few days ago, subtle comments from clients who had clearly heard about her separation from John. You know how word travels in this city, Margot had said when Andrea brought it up earlier that week. But don't worry, people come here because they admire you. They're not going to let some gossip keep them away. Andrea had appreciated Margot's reassurance, but she couldn't ignore the subtle shifts in tone from some of her regular clients. A few had asked pointed questions about her personal life, while others had exchanged knowing glances when they thought she wasn't looking. It wasn't enough to disrupt the business, but it was enough to remind Andrea that her situation was becoming public knowledge. This morning, as she finalized the display for the new collection, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Andrea, darling, it's been too long. Andrea turned to see Veronica Blake, one of her wealthier clients and a known purveyor of gossip in the French Quarter. Veronica's oversized sunglasses and perfectly coiffed hair gave her an air of polished confidence, but Andrea knew better than to trust her charming demeanor. Veronica, Andrea greeted, keeping her tone polite but guarded. What brings you in today? Oh, just browsing, Veronica said with a dismissive wave. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. But more importantly, I wanted to see how you've been. I heard about, well, you know. Andrea's smile didn't falter. I'm doing well, thank you. The boutique keeps me busy. Veronica leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You're handling it so gracefully, Andrea. Honestly, I don't know how you do it. If it were me, I'd probably have fled the city in shame. Andrea's grip on the display tightened, but her expression remained calm. I believe in facing challenges head-on, Veronica. Running away isn't my style. Veronica's laugh was light, but there was an edge to it. Oh, I admire that, truly. Well, don't let me distract you. I'll just have a look around. As Veronica wandered off, Andrea exhaled slowly. Encounters like this were draining, but they also fueled her determination to succeed. The boutique wasn't just her livelihood. It was her proof that she could rise above the noise and thrive. Andrea moved back to the task at hand, arranging the final touches on the display for the promotional event. She made sure every handbag was positioned perfectly, the light catching the subtle shimmer of their design. If there was one thing she could control in this whirlwind of chaos, it was how her boutique looked to the world. Margot approached with her usual efficiency, clipboard in hand. Vendors confirmed for the event, and the caterer just sent over the final menu. Everything's on track. Perfect, Andrea replied, offering a small smile. Thanks for staying on top of it all. Margot hesitated, then added, You should know, though, I overheard Veronica talking to one of the other customers. Well, you know how she is. Andrea sighed. Of course, Veronica wouldn't just shop quietly. What now? She mentioned your separation, Margot said carefully. Something about how you're throwing this event to distract yourself from the scandal. You know how people love to spin stories. Andrea's jaw tightened. She'd expected the whispers, but hearing how quickly Veronica had spread them still stung. Let them talk, she said finally. This boutique has survived worse than gossip. I won't let it define me. Margot nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. Besides, most people are here because they admire your work, not to dig into your personal life. Andrea turned back to the display, but the conversation lingered in her mind. She'd built her reputation on professionalism and excellence, and she wouldn't let anyone tarnish that. The event wasn't just an opportunity to showcase her new collection. It was a statement. As the afternoon wore on, the boutique settled into its usual rhythm. Clients came and went, most oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. By the time the last customer left, Andrea felt a measure of calm return. She closed the boutique with Margot's help, her thoughts already turning to the event. Later that evening, as Andrea reviewed the final details from her home office, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Karina's social media account, a selfie of her and John, captioned, "Countdown to our big Miami move. Can't wait to start this new chapter together." Andrea stared at the photo for a moment, a mix of emotions swirling within her. The blatant audacity of their happiness was almost laughable. Yet, as she saved the post to her evidence folder, a sharp sense of satisfaction settled over her. Let them enjoy their moment, she thought. Reality would catch up to them soon enough. Tomorrow's event wasn't just about the boutique, it was about reclaiming her narrative. She would show the city, her clients, and herself that she was more than John's ex-wife or the subject of idle gossip. Andrea was a survivor, a creator, and a force to be reckoned with. As she shut her laptop and prepared for bed, Andrea felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, and she knew the best way to silence the noise was to keep moving forward. The Miami skyline sparkled in the late afternoon sun as John leaned back in his chair, sipping on an overpriced cocktail by the hotel pool. Karina sat beside him, scrolling through her phone with a faint smile, occasionally giggling at posts that only she seemed to find amusing. To anyone passing by, they might have appeared to be the picture of carefree luxury, a couple basking in the glow of their next big adventure. But beneath the surface, cracks were already beginning to form. "Have you heard from the movers yet?" Karina asked, her tone slightly sharper than usual. John waved dismissively. "They'll handle it. We'll get everything sorted once we're settled in the new condo." Karina frowned. "You keep saying that, but we've barely finalized the lease. What if there's a delay? I don't want to be stuck in this hotel longer than we have to be." John sighed, setting his drink down. "Relax, Karina. I've got it under control." She didn't look convinced. In fact, she looked more annoyed than reassured. Karina had been patient, too patient, in her opinion. When John had promised her a glamorous new life in Miami, she'd imagined something seamless, a fairy tale where they stepped into a new home and began their next chapter effortlessly. But instead, they were stuck in a mid-tier hotel with expenses mounting and no clear plan in sight. Her irritation only grew when she glanced at her phone again and saw Andrea's boutique featured in a local news article. The promotional event had drawn a respectable amount of attention, and Karina couldn't help but notice how poised and confident Andrea looked in the accompanying photo. "She looks happy," Karina muttered, more to herself than to John. John glanced over, his expression hardening as he saw the image on her screen. "Don't let her fool you," he said coldly. "Andrea knows how to play the part, but trust me, she's probably falling apart behind the scenes." Karina didn't respond immediately. Something about John's tone grated on her, and for the first time she wondered if Andrea was as fragile as John seemed to believe. From everything Karina had seen so far, Andrea didn't look like someone who was unraveling. She looked like someone who had everything under control. As John flagged down a waiter for another drink, Karina found herself scrolling through Andrea's social media. She saw posts highlighting the boutique's new collection, snapshots of the event setup, and glowing comments from customers. It was all meticulously curated, but there was an undeniable authenticity to it, something that felt genuine, even amidst the polish. "Does she still talk to you?" Karina asked suddenly, her eyes still on the screen. John snorted. "Andrea? Number she knows better. She's just waiting for this whole thing to blow over so she can cling to whatever scraps she has left." Karina's fingers hovered over the screen. She wasn't sure why, but she felt compelled to dig deeper, to see more of Andrea's posts, and perhaps even understand the woman whose life she had helped disrupt. But the more she looked, the more a nagging feeling grew in the back of her mind. Andrea didn't look like someone waiting for anything. She looked like someone who was moving forward. Karina locked her phone and leaned back in her chair, the warm Miami breeze brushing against her skin. For the first time since arriving, a seed of doubt began to take root. She had ignored small things before, John's dismissive tone, his habit of deflecting responsibility, but now, with Andrea's composed image fresh in her mind, those doubts felt harder to suppress. She turned to John, who was now scrolling through his own phone with an air of irritation. "What's your plan exactly?" she asked, her voice more measured than confrontational. John didn't look up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Karina pressed, "what's the plan for us? For Miami? For anything beyond sitting by this pool spending money we don't have?" John's gaze finally lifted, annoyance flashing across his face. "I told you, everything is under control. You just have to trust me." Karina crossed her arms. "Trust you? Like Andrea trusted you. Look where that got her." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't regret them. John's jaw tightened, his facade of confidence cracking for a moment, before he leaned closer, his voice low and cutting. "Watch it, Karina. I've done more for you than you'll ever understand. Don't start acting like you know better." Karina didn't flinch, her expression steady as she met his glare. "Maybe I don't know everything, but I know this isn't what you promised me. And if you're not careful, you're going to lose a lot more than just Andrea." John leaned back in his chair, muttering under his breath before picking up his phone again. Karina turned her attention back to the pool, but the tension between them lingered, heavier than the humid Miami air. Later that evening, Karina sat alone in their hotel room while John went to meet with an old friend. She opened her laptop, her curiosity about Andrea pulling her back online. She searched Andrea's boutique again, reading reviews from loyal customers who praised her professionalism and strength. Scrolling further, Karina stumbled upon a public announcement about the boutique's expansion plans. Andrea had shared a polished photo of herself standing in front of the boutique, a caption detailing her excitement about opening a second location. It hit Karina then. Andrea wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. While John had painted her as fragile and broken, Andrea seemed to be doing better than ever. A pang of unease settled in Karina's chest. What if John wasn't the person she thought he was? What if Andrea had been the one holding everything together all along? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. John entered, looking irritated and tired. He tossed his keys onto the dresser and loosened his tie without a word. "How was your meeting?" Karina asked, trying to gauge his mood. "Fine," John replied curtly. "We've got options for the condo, but it'll take more time than I expected. Everything's a hassle these days." Karina didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him, noticing for the first time how the confidence he exuded seemed to falter when faced with even minor inconveniences. It was a far cry from the man she had idealized when their relationship began. As John poured himself a drink, Karina's resolve strengthened. She needed to reevaluate everything: her relationship with John, her choices, and the kind of future she truly wanted. Andrea's success was proof that walking away wasn't just possible, it could lead to something better. By the time John sat down with his drink, Karina had already made up her mind. She wouldn't confront him tonight, but her patience was running thin. And John, she realized, had no idea how close he was to losing everything. The courtroom was colder than Andrea had expected, the air conditioning humming softly as she sat at the polished wooden table beside Maria. The weight of the past weeks pressed heavily on her shoulders, but Andrea's posture remained poised, her expression calm. She'd spent countless hours preparing for this moment, and now it was here. Maria leaned over, her voice low and confident. "Everything's in place. Let him play his games. We have the facts." Andrea nodded, her eyes fixed ahead as the door opened, and John entered with his lawyer. He looked composed, almost smug, wearing the same false confidence that Andrea had grown all too familiar with during their marriage. He barely glanced at her as he took his seat across the room. The judge entered moments later, and the courtroom settled into a quiet tension. Andrea focused on the proceedings, tuning out the peripheral noise. John's lawyer, a man with an air of practiced charm, began by attempting to portray John as the aggrieved party. He spoke of years of marital strain, financial disagreements, and Andrea's supposed controlling behavior. Andrea kept her gaze steady, refusing to let the pointed words affect her. When it was Maria's turn, she rose with the quiet authority that Andrea had come to admire. "Your Honor," Maria began, "my client has come prepared today to provide evidence that contradicts the claims made by Mr. Carter. This is not a case of marital discord. It is a matter of financial manipulation and betrayal." Maria's words were clear and deliberate as she presented the meticulously compiled evidence. Andrea watched as the judge reviewed screenshots of John's texts, the bank statements showing the drained joint account, and the timeline of transactions that aligned suspiciously with John's Miami plans. The turning point came when Maria introduced Karina's social media posts as evidence. Photos of lavish dinners and travel, all funded by the joint account, painted a stark picture. John shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his previously calm demeanor cracking. As the session continued, Andrea caught glimpses of John's frustration growing. He whispered heatedly to his lawyer, his tone sharp enough to catch the attention of those nearby. Andrea felt a flicker of satisfaction. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one on the defensive. The judge asked a few pointed questions, pressing John's lawyer to explain the discrepancies in his client's story. The lawyer faltered slightly, his charm unable to mask the gaping holes in John's narrative. When the session broke for a brief recess, Andrea turned to Maria. "How do you think it's going?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Maria smiled faintly. "Better than expected. He's rattled. That's exactly where we want him." Andrea allowed herself a small smile. This wasn't over yet. But for the first time in a long while, she felt the scales tipping in her favor. As the court reconvened after the recess, Andrea felt a renewed sense of focus. She adjusted her blazer, sitting tall as the judge returned to her seat. The weight of this moment wasn't lost on her, but she refused to let it intimidate her. She had fought too hard to let John's theatrics overshadow the truth. John's lawyer stood, his expression calm, but his voice carrying a slight edge of desperation. He launched into a new line of questioning, one designed to paint Andrea's financial independence as deceptive. "Mrs. Hart," the lawyer began, addressing Andrea directly, "you've mentioned multiple times how your boutique is your primary source of income. Could you confirm for the court how long you've been diverting funds into a private account without Mr. Carter's knowledge?" Andrea glanced at Maria, who gave her a reassuring nod. Keeping her tone even, Andrea replied, "There was no diversion of funds. My personal account is entirely separate from our joint account and has always been used exclusively for the boutique's operations. I have detailed records of all transactions to prove this." The lawyer pressed further, attempting to imply dishonesty, but Maria quickly objected, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Your Honor, the opposing counsel is insinuating misconduct without presenting evidence to support these claims. My client's financial records are transparent and have been submitted in full." The judge nodded. "Sustained. Let's move on, Counselor." Andrea felt a wave of gratitude for Maria's steadfast presence. John's lawyer shifted tactics, this time focusing on Andrea's response to the emptied joint account. "Mrs. Hart, freezing the joint account left my client unable to access any remaining funds for basic needs. Would you consider this a fair course of action?" Andrea met his gaze directly, her voice calm but firm. "What's unfair is having the account drained without my consent to fund an affair and a lavish lifestyle in Miami. Freezing the account was necessary to prevent further unauthorized withdrawals. It was not a decision I made lightly." Her words hung in the air, their clarity leaving little room for misinterpretation. John shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his lawyer quickly redirecting to less damaging topics. Maria rose again, her demeanor cool and precise. "Your Honor, the evidence presented today makes it abundantly clear that my client acted within her rights to protect her assets. Mr. Carter's actions, documented through his own transactions and communications, demonstrate a consistent pattern of financial irresponsibility and deceit." The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly," she said, her voice firm. "This court finds Mrs. Hart's actions justified given the circumstances. The motion to freeze remaining joint assets is upheld. Additionally, Mr. Carter's claims regarding boutique earnings are without merit and will not be considered further." Andrea exhaled quietly, a weight lifting from her chest. The judge's ruling was a significant step forward, one that affirmed her choices and protected her from further manipulation. As the session concluded, John shot her a glare from across the courtroom. It was a look she recognized, a mixture of frustration and disbelief, as though he couldn't fathom losing. Andrea met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. Maria leaned over, her tone triumphant. "This is just the beginning, Andrea. He's going to unravel from here. You've got this." Andrea stood, gathering her belongings as she prepared to leave. The fight wasn't over, but today had proven one thing. She wasn't the same woman John had underestimated for so long. As she stepped into the sunlight outside the courthouse, Andrea felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. The morning after the courtroom victory, Andrea sat in her boutique's office, scrolling through the growing stack of supportive messages from customers and friends. Her inbox was filled with encouragement and well wishes, each note reinforcing that she wasn't as alone as she had once felt. The buzz surrounding her boutique's upcoming expansion had begun to eclipse the whispers about her personal life, giving her a renewed sense of purpose. Margot knocked gently on the open door, stepping in with a steaming cup of coffee. "Morning, boss," she said with a grin. "You're already famous in the French Quarter. I had 3 customers this morning tell me they admire how you're handling everything." Andrea smiled, taking the coffee gratefully. "That's nice to hear," she said, though the weight of everything that still needed to be done lingered at the edges of her thoughts. "Let's just hope it translates into strong sales for the new location." Margot perched on the edge of the desk, her expression warm but serious. "It will. People trust you, Andrea. That's why they come here. They're not just buying the clothes. They're buying the experience you've created." Andrea nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "Thanks, Margot. You always know what to say to keep me grounded." Their conversation was interrupted by Andrea's phone buzzing. She glanced at the screen and saw a text from Amanda. "Mom wants to meet with you." "She's ready to talk." Andrea raised an eyebrow, her thoughts turning to her earlier conversation with Linda. Though she'd sensed that Linda was beginning to question John's version of events, she hadn't expected her to reach out so soon. Margot noticed the shift in Andrea's expression. "Everything okay?" Andrea set the phone down. "Looks like Linda wants to meet. I think she's starting to see the truth." Margot gave a small nod of approval. "That's a good thing. She needs to hear it from you, not from John." Later that afternoon, Andrea found herself walking into a quiet cafe where Linda was already seated at a corner table. The older woman looked composed but tired, her hands clasped around a cup of tea. "Linda," Andrea greeted warmly as she approached. Linda looked up, her expression softening. "Andrea, thank you for coming." As Andrea sat down, Linda hesitated, then said, "I owe you an apology. I didn't want to believe what you told me, but after seeing some of the evidence Amanda shared, I can't ignore it anymore." Andrea's heart softened at the admission. "I know this hasn't been easy for you," she said gently. "It's not easy for me either." Linda sighed deeply. "I just don't understand how John became this person. It's like I don't even know my own son anymore." Andrea reached across the table, placing a hand over Linda's. "People change, and sometimes not for the better. But it's not your fault, Linda. None of this is." Linda nodded slowly, her fingers tightening slightly around her cup. "It's hard to accept, you know. As a mother, you want to believe the best about your children. But now, I can't ignore what's in front of me." Andrea leaned back in her chair, understanding the internal struggle Linda was facing. It's never easy to reconcile the image we have of someone with the reality of their actions, but acknowledging it is the first step. Linda looked up, her eyes searching Andrea's face. "Do you think he even realizes the damage he's done? Not just to you, but to himself?" Andrea hesitated, then shook her head. "Honestly, no. John's always been good at justifying his actions to himself. I don't think he's even begun to comprehend the consequences of what he's done." Linda sighed again, this time more heavily, as though the weight of everything was pressing down on her. "I've been enabling him for too long, haven't I? Making excuses, sweeping things under the rug. Maybe if I'd held him accountable earlier, none of this would have happened." Andrea reached across the table again, her voice firm but kind. "Linda, we all have choices. John made his. You can't carry the blame for that." The older woman nodded, though her expression remained conflicted. "Thank you for saying that. I want you to know that I support you in this, Andrea, and I'll talk to Amanda about helping where we can. You've been through enough, and you don't deserve to handle it alone." Andrea felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "That means more than you know, Linda." "Thank you," As their conversation wound down, Andrea left the cafe with a renewed sense of clarity. While mending relationships with John's family wasn't her priority, having Linda and Amanda on her side felt like a small but meaningful victory. Back at the boutique, Andrea found Margot updating the inventory system, her usual efficiency on full display. "How did it go?" Margot asked without looking up. Andrea set her bag down and smiled faintly. "Better than I expected. Linda's coming around and Amanda's backing me up. It feels like a step in the right direction." Margot glanced at her, a sly grin forming. "See? You're winning on all fronts. Now, let's focus on making this event a knockout." Andrea chuckled softly. "One battle at a time, Margot. But yes, let's make it unforgettable." As the evening drew closer, Andrea worked alongside Margot to finalize the last details for the event. The boutique buzzed with quiet anticipation, and for the first time in weeks, Andrea felt the scales tipping firmly in her favor. The momentum was building, both personally and professionally. And while she knew the fight wasn't over, she also knew she was ready for whatever came next. John sat in the dimly lit corner of a Miami bar, the faint sound of jazz playing in the background as he nursed his drink. The once confident air he carried had faded, replaced by a restlessness he couldn't shake. His meeting with a potential business investor earlier that day had gone nowhere, and the condo deal he'd been counting on had fallen through. Everything seemed to be slipping through his fingers faster than he could grasp it. Karina's voice cut through his thoughts. "You've been staring at that glass for the past 10 minutes. What's the plan, John?" Her tone was sharper than usual, her patience clearly wearing thin. She sat across from him, her posture tense as she sipped her wine. Karina had been holding back her frustrations for weeks, but with no clear direction from John and their resources dwindling, her composure was starting to crack. John exhaled, setting his glass down with a heavy thud. "I told you, I'm working on it. These things take time." Karina shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Time? We've been here for weeks, and what do we have to show for it? A pile of hotel bills and no real plan for what's next. You promised me a fresh start, John. This isn't it." Her words stung, though John tried not to let it show. "I'm doing everything I can, Karina. Do you think it's easy, rebuilding from scratch after everything Andrea's done to me?" Karina narrowed her eyes. "Andrea? Don't put this on her. From where I'm sitting, she seems to be doing just fine. You're the one who hasn't delivered on anything you promised." John's jaw tightened, a flash of anger crossing his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Karina shot back, her voice rising slightly. "She's thriving, John. Have you even looked at what she's doing? She's not just surviving, she's winning. Meanwhile, we're stuck in this mess, and you don't have a single solid plan to get us out of it." John leaned back, his expression darkening as he stared at her. "You think you could do better?" he asked coldly. Karina didn't answer right away, her gaze steady as she studied him. For the first time, she realized just how little substance there was beneath John's bravado. She had ignored the warning signs for months, convincing herself that his charm and confidence were enough to carry them through. But now, with nothing to show for their time in Miami, she couldn't ignore the truth anymore. "I don't know," Karina said finally, her voice quieter but no less firm. "But I know this isn't working, and I'm not sure I can keep waiting for you to figure it out." Her words hung in the air between them, a crack in their fragile partnership that neither seemed willing to address directly. The tension between John and Karina carried over into the next morning, their conversations clipped and laced with unspoken frustrations. John had left the hotel early, claiming he needed to meet with another potential investor, though Karina suspected it was just an excuse to escape the growing pressure. Left alone, she found herself scrolling through Andrea's boutique page again, unable to shake the nagging comparisons. Andrea had just posted about the successful expansion event, complete with photos of smiling customers and glowing comments about the boutique's elegant new collection. Karina stared at the images, a mixture of envy and guilt swirling within her. Andrea's life seemed to be the epitome of control and success, while her own felt increasingly uncertain and unstable. Her phone buzzed with a message from one of her friends back home. "Saw Andrea's post. She looks amazing. Are you still in Miami with John? How's it going?" Karina hesitated before typing back a vague response. "Yeah, we're still here. Things are fine." The truth felt too complicated to explain, even to someone she trusted. She wasn't sure how much longer she could cling to the illusion that everything would magically work out. By the time John returned that afternoon, Karina had made a decision. She met him at the door, her expression calm but resolute. "We need to talk," she said, stepping aside to let him in. John groaned, shrugging off his jacket. "Can it wait?" "I've had a long day." "No, it can't," Karina replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. John sighed, dropping into the nearest chair. "Fine. What is it now?" Karina crossed her arms, meeting his gaze with a steady determination she hadn't shown before. "This isn't working, John. I can't keep pretending it is. We're running out of money, you don't have a solid plan, and frankly, I don't trust that you'll deliver on anything you've promised." John's eyes narrowed. "Are you serious right now? After everything I've done for you, you're just going to walk away?" "Done for me?" Karina shot back, her voice rising. "What have you done, John? Drained an account that wasn't yours to fund this fantasy? Dragged me to Miami with nothing but empty promises? I can't keep living like this." John stood, his frustration boiling over. "You think you're blameless in all this? You think you're some innocent victim? You knew exactly what you were getting into." Karina's expression didn't waver. "Maybe I did. But I also thought you were capable of following through. I was wrong." She grabbed her bag from the corner of the room, slinging it over her shoulder. "I'm leaving, John. I don't know where I'm going yet, but anywhere has to be better than here." John stared at her, stunned into silence for the first time. He reached out as though to stop her, but she stepped back. "Good luck, John," Karina said, her voice steady. "You're going to need it." With that, she walked out the door, leaving John alone in the empty hotel room. For a moment, he simply stood there, his mind racing as the full weight of her departure settled over him. The cracks in his carefully constructed world had finally split wide open, and John was left with nothing but the consequences of his choices. Andrea stood in the center of her boutique's newest location, taking a moment to absorb the vibrant energy around her. The grand opening had exceeded her expectations, with customers bustling through the doors to explore the carefully curated collection she had spent months preparing. Glass displays shimmered with delicate jewelry, and racks of clothing showcased designs that felt both modern and timeless. Margot approached with a clipboard, her enthusiasm evident in her quick steps. "Andrea, the turnout is incredible. We've already sold out of 2 pieces from the new line, and it's not even noon." Andrea smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. "That's amazing, Margot. You've been incredible through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Margot waved her off playfully. "You give me too much credit. This is all you, boss. You built this from the ground up, and now the city's finally seeing what you're capable of." Andrea's gaze drifted across the room, taking in the cheerful chatter of customers and the hum of success that filled the space. This wasn't just a boutique, it was a testament to her resilience, her ability to overcome the chaos John had tried to impose on her life. As the day wore on, Andrea made her rounds, greeting customers and chatting with vendors who had partnered with her for the opening. She felt an immense sense of pride seeing her vision come to life, but there was also a quiet resolve within her. This wasn't just about proving something to herself. It was about solidifying her independence and reclaiming her narrative. Near the entrance, she noticed a familiar figure. Amanda stood quietly, observing the scene with a small smile. Andrea made her way over, her own smile widening as Amanda greeted her with a warm hug. "This is incredible," Amanda said, gesturing around the boutique. "You've really outdone yourself." "Thank you," Andrea replied. "It means a lot that you're here." Amanda's expression turned serious for a moment. "I wanted to let you know, Mum's been telling people how proud she is of you. She doesn't say it directly, but I think she realizes how wrong she was about John." Andrea's chest tightened, a mix of emotions swirling within her. "That's good to hear. I wasn't sure if she'd ever come around." "She has," Amanda assured her. "And honestly, I think seeing you thrive like this has helped her see things more clearly." Andrea nodded, her resolve strengthening. This wasn't just a victory for her boutique, it was a personal triumph that had rippled beyond her immediate circle, challenging assumptions and reshaping perceptions. The celebration continued into the afternoon, the boutique filled with laughter and life. For Andrea, the event marked more than just the opening of a new location. It was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one she was determined to embrace fully. As the grand opening continued into the late afternoon, Andrea found herself stepping outside for a moment of quiet. The crowd inside was lively and bustling, but the energy had begun to feel overwhelming. She leaned against the storefront, looking out at the steady rhythm of New Orleans' French Quarter. The warm air carried the faint sound of street musicians, a soothing contrast to the chaos she had worked so hard to manage. Amanda joined her outside a moment later, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Thought you might need this," she said with a grin, handing one to Andrea. Andrea laughed softly, accepting the glass. "You're a lifesaver. I didn't even realize how much I needed a break." Amanda sipped her champagne, her gaze turning thoughtful. "You know, I was thinking earlier about John. Do you ever wonder if he's even capable of understanding how much he's lost?" Andrea considered the question for a moment, the familiar pang of frustration and hurt flickering in her chest. "I don't think he can," she said honestly. "For John, it's always been about control, controlling the narrative, controlling the people around him. But now, he doesn't have that anymore, and I don't think he knows how to function without it." Amanda nodded. "I see that. He's always been good at pretending he's invincible, but it's like a house of cards. One gust of wind, and it all falls apart." Andrea took a slow sip of her champagne, the weight of the past few months settling over her. "You know, for a long time, I blamed myself for everything that went wrong. I thought if I'd been more supportive, more understanding, things might have been different." Amanda placed a reassuring hand on Andrea's shoulder. "You can't take responsibility for his choices. He made them. You didn't." "I know that now," Andrea replied, her voice steady. "And honestly, I'm glad things happened the way they did. It forced me to find my strength, to build something for myself. If John hadn't walked away, I might never have realized how capable I am." Amanda smiled. "And now look at you. You've turned everything he tried to tear down into something extraordinary." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of laughter spilling out from the boutique. Andrea glanced through the window, seeing Margot animatedly chatting with a group of customers, her infectious energy lighting up the room. "I should probably get back in there," Andrea said, finishing her champagne. "Don't keep them waiting," Amanda replied with a wink. As Andrea stepped back inside, she was immediately greeted by one of her most loyal customers, Mrs. Dumont. The older woman beamed at her, holding up a shopping bag. "Andrea, my dear, this new collection is simply divine. You've outdone yourself," Mrs. Dumont said. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Dumont," Andrea replied warmly. "It means the world to me to have your support." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, laughter, and the steady hum of success. By the time the last customer left and the boutique was locked for the night, Andrea felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She and Margot sat together in the quiet space, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to them. "You did it," Margot said, raising her half-empty champagne glass in a toast. "We did it," Andrea corrected, clinking her glass against Margot's. As Andrea looked around the boutique, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, about proving to herself and everyone else that she could build something remarkable on her own terms. And for the first time in a long while, Andrea felt truly free. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Andrea's boutique as she reviewed the day's schedule. She had meetings with suppliers, a marketing team briefing, and a call with her lawyer, Maria, about finalizing the divorce proceedings. Though her days were packed, Andrea felt a growing sense of momentum. Each task brought her closer to fully reclaiming her life and securing her future. As she organized her notes, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from Amanda. "John just filed a petition to revisit the divorce settlement. He's claiming emotional distress and unfair division of assets. Call me when you can." Andrea's stomach twisted briefly before her resolve hardened. She had anticipated John would try something desperate, but seeing it in writing still stung. She quickly dialed Maria, pacing the boutique floor as she waited for the call to connect. Maria answered on the second ring, her tone brisk but reassuring. "I saw the petition, don't worry, it's weak at best. He's grasping at straws." "What's his angle?" Andrea asked, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "He's claiming he was emotionally manipulated during the divorce proceedings and that the boutique's expansion was somehow hidden from him. None of it holds water, but we'll need to prepare a response. The judge won't look kindly on baseless claims, so this will likely backfire on him." Andrea exhaled slowly, calming the frustration rising within her. "What's the next step?" "I'll draft a formal response today," Maria said. "We'll present the financial records again, and I'll highlight how transparent you've been throughout the process. His claim of emotional distress is subjective at best. Honestly, Andrea, this is a weak play, and it shows how desperate he's becoming." Andrea nodded, her confidence returning. "Thank you, Maria. Let me know if you need anything from me." After ending the call, Andrea sat at her desk, taking a moment to collect her thoughts. She knew John's actions weren't about winning in court. They were about regaining control. This was his last attempt to disrupt her life, but she wouldn't let him. Later that day, while overseeing the boutique's operations, Andrea noticed Margot approaching with a concerned expression. "You okay, boss?" Margot asked gently. Andrea hesitated before sharing the news. John filed a petition to revisit the divorce settlement. Margot's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Are you serious? After everything? What's his angle now?" Andrea explained briefly, her voice calm but firm. "He's trying to claim I manipulated him and hid the boutique's success from him. It's baseless, but it's still frustrating." Margot shook her head. "That's low, even for him. But you've got Maria, and you've got the truth. He's just showing everyone how desperate he is." Andrea smiled faintly. "Exactly. And that's why I'm not going to let this derail me. We have a business to run, and I won't let him take another second of my focus." Margot gave Andrea a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "You've got this," she said firmly. "If there's anyone who can shut him down, it's you and Maria. Now let's get back to making this boutique even more unstoppable." Andrea nodded, grateful for Margot's steadfast support. As her assistant returned to the floor to handle clients, Andrea's focus sharpened. She pulled out her laptop and began organizing the financial documents Maria might need. Every detail had already been meticulously documented during the divorce proceedings, but Andrea wanted to ensure they were ready to counter any claim John might attempt to fabricate. She couldn't shake the thought of John's audacity. It was as though he couldn't comprehend that his choices had consequences, that Andrea's success wasn't something he could twist into a narrative of victimhood. She had seen this side of him before, his ability to spin stories to suit his needs, but this time she wasn't the same woman who had once doubted her own instincts. As Andrea worked, Amanda called. "I just wanted to check in." Her voice came through, tinged with frustration. "I can't believe he's still trying to pull this stunt." Andrea sighed. "It's classic John, isn't it? He thinks he can twist the situation to his advantage." "I know. Mum's furious, by the way," Amanda added. "She said if he drags this out any longer, she's going to testify on your behalf. I've never seen her this mad at him before." Andrea couldn't help but laugh softly. "I appreciate the support, but I don't think it'll get that far. Maria says his case is weak, and if anything, this will only damage his credibility further." Amanda hesitated before speaking again. "Do you think he's doing this because of the boutique's success? Like, he can't stand seeing you move on without him?" "Probably," Andrea admitted. "But it doesn't matter why he's doing it. What matters is that I'm not letting him win." "Good," Amanda replied, "because you deserve better than this. Just remember, I've got your back if you need anything." Andrea felt a swell of gratitude. "Thank you, Amanda. It means a lot." After the call ended, Andrea returned to her preparations with renewed determination. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was proving to everyone, including John, that she was stronger than he ever gave her credit for. The hearing to address John's petition came 2 weeks later, held in the same courthouse where Andrea had first begun reclaiming her life. This time, however, she walked into the courtroom with an unshakable sense of confidence. Maria was at her side, her briefcase filled with the evidence needed to dismantle John's baseless claims. John was already seated at his table, his lawyer whispering something to him as Andrea entered. He glanced her way, his expression a mixture of frustration and forced composure. Andrea met his gaze briefly before taking her seat, refusing to give him the satisfaction of any reaction. The proceedings began with John's lawyer attempting to argue that Andrea's boutique expansion had been deliberately concealed during the divorce. He painted a picture of John as a man blindsided by his ex-wife's financial decisions, claiming that the division of assets had been unfair as a result. Maria stood to counter the argument, her voice calm but authoritative. "Your Honor, the timeline of events clearly demonstrates that my client's boutique expansion occurred well after the divorce proceedings had begun. Furthermore, all financial records were disclosed transparently during the initial settlement. Any claim to the contrary is not only baseless, but also an insult to the integrity of these proceedings." She then presented a detailed timeline, backed by receipts, bank statements, and even media coverage of the boutique's expansion. It was irrefutable proof that Andrea had acted in full compliance with the law and had nothing to hide. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, her expression unreadable as she asked John's lawyer a series of pointed questions. The lawyer faltered under the scrutiny, his arguments unraveling with each response. Then came the final blow. Maria introduced evidence of John's own financial mismanagement, transactions from the joint account that he had drained, which included luxury purchases and travel expenses with Karina. The room fell silent as Maria's words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the weak narrative John had tried to construct. When the judge finally spoke, her tone was firm. "It is clear to this court that Mr. Carter's petition lacks merit and serves no purpose other than to cause undue burden on the parties involved. The original settlement stands, and this case is dismissed." Furthermore, Mr. Carter is ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by Ms. Hart as a result of this filing." Andrea's chest swelled with relief and quiet triumph as the gavel came down. She turned to Maria, who gave her a small, satisfied smile. "I told you he didn't have a case," Maria said. Andrea nodded, her voice steady. "Thank you, Maria, for everything." As they left the courtroom, Andrea felt lighter than she had in months. The battle was over, and John's desperate attempts to regain control had only solidified her position. She had fought for her independence, her dignity, and her future, and she had won. Walking out into the bright sunlight, Andrea allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. This wasn't just about defeating John, it was about proving to herself that she could rise above any challenge, no matter how daunting. And as she looked ahead to the next chapter of her life, she knew one thing for certain. She was unstoppable. The soft hum of conversation filled Andrea's new boutique as she stood near the entrance, greeting guests who had come to celebrate its grand reopening after the whirlwind year she had endured. The evening light streaming through the large windows gave the space a golden glow, casting a sense of calm over the carefully curated displays. Andrea felt a surge of pride as she watched customers admire the collections she had poured her heart into, chatting animatedly about the boutique's growing reputation. Margot appeared at her side, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "You should take a break and enjoy this," she said with a grin. Andrea accepted one of the glasses, her smile warm. "You're right. Tonight isn't just about the boutique. It's about everything we've accomplished together." Margot nodded, gesturing to the lively crowd. "Look at this place. It's not just a boutique anymore, Andrea. It's a symbol. People see you, and they see strength, resilience. You've built more than a business. You've built a legacy." Andrea took a sip of her cider, letting Margot's words settle in. She glanced around the room, catching glimpses of familiar faces. Amanda was chatting with a few of Andrea's long-time clients, her support unwavering since the moment she decided to stand by Andrea's side. Even Linda had attended, her expression one of quiet pride as she admired the boutique's transformation. The night was a culmination of everything Andrea had worked for, not just the business, but the life she had fought to reclaim. Every challenge, every betrayal, and every triumph had led her to this moment. As the evening unfolded, Andrea found herself reflecting on the year that had passed. She thought of John, of the lies he had told and the chaos he had tried to bring into her life. But now, those memories felt distant, like a storm that had long since cleared. John's desperate attempts to regain control had only underscored how much he had underestimated her, and his absence from her life now felt like a gift rather than a loss. She thought of Karina, too, and the surprising message she had received weeks earlier. After leaving John in Miami, Karina had reached out to Andrea, apologizing for her role in the betrayal and thanking her for setting an example of strength and independence. The message had been unexpected, but Andrea had appreciated the sentiment. It was a reminder that even amidst betrayal, growth and change were possible. "Earth to Andrea," Margot teased, breaking into her thoughts. "You're zoning out again." Andrea laughed, shaking her head. "Just reflecting on how far we've come." Margot raised her glass in a toast. "To everything we've overcome, and everything we're building, this is only the beginning." Andrea clinked her glass against Margot's, her resolve firm. She wasn't just closing a chapter tonight. She was stepping fully into a new one that she had built on her own terms. As the evening began to wind down, Andrea made her way to the small stage at the front of the boutique. A microphone stood waiting, and Margot had insisted she say a few words to mark the occasion. Andrea hesitated briefly, but as she glanced around the room at the faces of people who had supported her through her journey, she felt a wave of gratitude that steadied her. Tapping the microphone gently, she drew the crowd's attention. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to her. Andrea smiled, her confidence radiating through the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice clear and warm. "This boutique represents so much more than just a place to shop. For me, it's a symbol of perseverance, of finding strength when everything feels uncertain." She paused, letting her words settle. "The past year has been a whirlwind, full of challenges I never expected. But through those challenges, I discovered something I didn't realize I had: resilience. And that resilience didn't just come from within. It came from all of you, friends, family, loyal customers, who reminded me of my worth when I needed it the most." Andrea's gaze shifted to Amanda and Linda, who stood near the back. Amanda gave her an encouraging nod, while Linda smiled softly, her pride evident. "This boutique isn't just about fashion or business," Andrea continued. "It's about creating a space where people feel empowered, where they can express themselves and find beauty in their own stories. That's what I've always wanted it to be, and tonight I feel like we've truly achieved that." The crowd erupted into applause, and Andrea felt a swell of emotion. She stepped off the stage as Margot pulled her into a quick hug. "You nailed it," Margot said with a grin. "Thanks," Andrea replied, her smile growing. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." As the guests began to trickle out, Andrea lingered near the door, thanking each one personally. When the boutique finally emptied and the last of the champagne glasses were cleared away, Andrea locked the doors and leaned against them, letting out a long, contented breath. The quiet of the boutique felt comforting now, a stark contrast to the chaos she had endured during the height of her divorce. She walked slowly through the space, her fingers brushing against the racks and displays she had meticulously designed. Every piece felt like a testament to her growth, a reflection of who she had become. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and Andrea picked it up to see a message from Karina. "Congratulations on the new boutique. You deserve it. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." Andrea read the message twice, a soft smile forming. It was a small but meaningful gesture, a final piece of closure she hadn't realized she needed. As she set her phone down, Andrea glanced at the framed photo on her desk. It wasn't of her old life or her marriage, but of her boutique's first grand opening years ago. In the photo, she stood smiling in front of the shop, filled with the hope and determination that had carried her through the toughest times. Now, as she looked at the image, she realized that same hope and determination had only grown stronger. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, building a life that was entirely her own. Andrea turned off the lights and stepped outside into the quiet night. The streets of New Orleans were alive with music and laughter, a vibrant reminder of the city's resilience and spirit. She walked slowly, taking it all in, the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. As she headed home, Andrea felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. This was the life she had fought for, the future she had carved out with her own hands. And as she moved forward, she knew one thing for certain: her story was just beginning.